Corruption is worse than prostitution. The latter might endanger the morals of an individual, but the former invariably endangers the morals of the entire country. That's a famous quote from the Austrian anti-corruption writer Karl Kroll. That canker remains in Ghana and getting even worse. Now, Ghana recorded its worst performance since 2012 in the latest Corruption Perception Index released yesterday. The report, published by the Ghana Integrity Initiative yesterday, reveals that Ghana scored 40 out of a possible clean score of 100, which ranked the country 81 out of about 180 countries that were assessed. This reflects a drop of 3 points from the 2016 score of 43. The lowest Ghana has scored since John Mahama took office in 2012. In case you missed details from the report, here are brief graphics that will help you understand it and put it in a bit easier way. And I'm going to go through this rather quickly.
A scale of 0 to 100, where 0 is highly corrupt and 100 is very clean, this year's results show some alarming trends. More than 2/3 of countries score below 50 on the index, with an average of 43. This year, New Zealand comes out on top, while Somalia scores the worst. But no country is clean across the board. No country scores a perfect 100. Our analysis shows that countries that are lower on the index are also more dangerous for journalists and activists. In fact, one journalist is killed every week in a highly corrupt country. Low scores can also point to countries where activists are prevented from speaking out against corrupt officials. Despite efforts to combat corruption around the world, little progress has been made, and ordinary people suffer as a result. In today's environment, where there are widespread crackdowns on activists and media, the global community must do more. Help us speak out against corruption. Together, we can hold those in power to account. Visit transparency.org to learn more, and follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram to learn about how you can stop corruption.
So there you have it. So who takes the blame? It's been a back and forth between the current administration led by Nana Akufo-Addo and the former led by John Mahama. Today, the two sides have been clashing on the matter. Government spokesperson on governance and legal affairs, Herbert Krapper, spoke on the Super Morning Show, and he lays the blame squarely on the John Mahama-led administration. On the other hand, Felix Kwatri-Fosu, who is a former Deputy Communications Minister, says the Akufo-Addo administration should carry its load alone. So let's start the investigation by tracing the source. On News Desk, Benis Abubedi spoke to Programs Director of the Ghana Integrity Initiative, the local chapter of the International Anti-Graft Agency, Transparency International. Her name is Mary Ada.
One thing we need to recognize is the fact that the Corruption Perception Index is an aggregate score, and it captures the views and opinions of business people and experts who have done in-depth analysis on the subject matter of corruption, looking at various indicators or capturing it from various perspectives. And so
in your delivery, you spoke about how the treatment meted out to journalists, for example, the culture of silence in some countries and governance as a whole affects the score that the country gets in terms of the CPI. So in Ghana's case, what exactly led to our drop? What were the things that we considered, or what were the key examples that led to the drop?
Thank you very much. If I tell you it is this or that happened, then I would be telling a lie. But let me base it on the indicators. Okay. Bribery. Does it happen or not in our institutions? Bribery continues to be pervasive, and it continues to increase, and we have cited that over time. We say it is getting to impunity levels. In fact, people do it with such impunity and get away with it. We are talking about people using their public office for private gain. Does that happen or not? That's an indicator for measuring the CPI, and that is what I can talk to, and that's what I can affirm. Do people pick their protocol lists and things like that? Continue to happen every day. And so we say conflict of interest is one of the key indicators in this survey.
Okay.
And then people misappropriating funds and ensuring that there's so much bureaucracy in the system. Those are the indicators I can use to explain that this is what is accounting for our continuous drop. There are perceptions out there that the public sector is not performing as it should. And the perceptions out there also that there is a lack of sanctioning, effective sanctioning regimes, both administrative and then when it comes to our judicial sector, is the other one. We need to ensure that we deal with these perceptions, because the people who are responding to these surveys are people who are dealing with the public sector on a daily basis. So when we continue to experience those and then the perception is full, definitely it will go up. But then it is experiences and the opinions of people who have been.
So while Ghana dropped, Cote d'Ivoire went higher in 9 points. So, I mean, you're citing examples that led to that increase in points. For example, they passed along the prevention and repression of corruption. They set up a national anti-corruption authority and pursued compliance with some international initiatives like the Extractives Industry Transparency Initiative. Now, here in Ghana, just this week, we've seen that Parliament has approved the appointment of the special prosecutor. We've also seen a very vocal president who is committed to fighting corruption. Are we likely to see all this culminate, not to preempt what our CPI will be for 2018, but are these factors likely to give us a better outlook?
Oh, I would say yes. Yes, because if we ensure, and let me give an example of one thing that has happened over time. It's the UNCAC review that was done previously. One of the things or the banes of fighting corruption which was identified was the issue that investigations, prosecution and sanctions was not being adhered to as much as it should. And so the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, the review that happened in Ghana, indicated as much. And so the government putting in place a legislation and also getting somebody to focus on fighting corruption, investigation, prosecutions, and ensuring that this will culminate in sanctioning is a good move. But then basic economic theory will tell you that these things that happen in the macro level take time to manifest. For Ghana, we indicate that we do not have the issue of free speech. And so in our recommendations, we talk about government committing more resources to implement the National Anti-Corruption Action Plan. That is key, the 10-year framework to fight corruption by all stakeholders. We all must take our roles in the NACAB seriously. We all must be out there doing sensitization, raising awareness, putting in preventive measures to ensure that we curb the opportunities for corrupt behavior to happen. And we as well must all go out there to encourage and advocate that investigations, sanctioning, and prosecution happens. When we see investigations happening like you talked about earlier, and the president comes out quickly to pronounce judgment, it is difficult. In the minds of people, we begin to wonder, is the executive president an investigating authority as well? Can we allow the independent mandated investigative authorities to do their work independently? Then we can assert that independence and say, oh yes, YOCO is doing its work. It has come out with these conclusions which are acceptable to all. But when we have issues coming up and we have impediments in the way, I remember one of the cases where an issue came up, and before the committee was set up, already BNI had come up to say, oh, there was no issue. Why don't we allow the processes to unfold? And then at the end of the day, we can say, yes, this is the right thing. And every Ghanaian would accept the findings.
All right, so you've had Mary Ada there. She's with the Ghana Integrity Initiative. We want you to be a part of this conversation. So go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/JoyNews on TV, and our Twitter handle is at JoyNews on TV. Right now, we're going to have a very quick conversation, but let's know what you think about Ghana's, the latest corruption index, putting Ghana at 40, dropping all the way from 47. I'm here in the studio with Daniel Batidam. He's an advisor, or former advisor to the president during John Mahama's administration. Sir, you're welcome.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for coming. How are you doing? It's been a while.
Well, I am hanging in there.
Hanging in there.
Yeah.
What are your general thoughts on the latest corruption perception index, putting Ghana at 40, which according to experts is the worst we've recorded since 2012?
I don't know why we decided to peg it against this 2012 in order to be able to say this is the worst. I think the good thing about using the score and not the ranking to assess oneself as a country is the fact that you can gauge your performance on a year-to-year basis. But to put this into context, I think Ghana has been part of this CPI for nearly 2 decades now, since 1999, when we had a score of 33%, our lowest. Fast forward to 2009, 2008 actually, where under the MPP administration we got as high up as 39%. That is an improvement from
which year
33.
is this, since you have the
2008.
Okay, 2008.
Yes. Between 2009 and 2014, Ghana rose steadily from 39% to 48, nearly 10 percentage points. So we peaked. The highest score Ghana ever had in the CPI was in 2014. And then after that, we started sliding back. In 2015, we slid down to 47. 2016, we came to 43. And now we have come to 40. I think what this is telling us about the fight against corruption is that whilst we are making progress, the progress has not been sustainable. In other words, we go 3 steps forward and come 4 steps backwards. And I think that is where people like myself get worried. And I would want Ghanaians to go beyond the comparison of which was our worst score and which was our best, and ask ourselves the more critical questions. What are we doing right, or what are we not doing right? Which is the explanation for this up and down movement. And for me, that is where I would like to come from. That is the background from which I would like to analyze this year's score.
Okay.
But one important point I want to make, because we are in the 2nd year of a new administration, is that having had the 4th Republic, where we have been able to have changes in government for maybe the 3rd or 4th time consecutively, one of the significant points of this year's score for me is the fact that it departs from what we have had in the past, where when new governments come into office, the first signal is an improvement. If not an improvement, at least a stabilization.
Is that what has happened over the years?
Yes. If you look from 2001 to 2002, when Kufuor came into office, that is where we moved up from 33 to 39 in 2002.
Okay.
And we believed at the time that it was because of the signal that the new administration sent that, look, there is going to be zero tolerance for corruption. Again, you look in 2009, when the new Atta Mills administration came in, 2009, 2010, we saw improvements again. Now, where my worry is that a new administration is ushered in, and what one would have expected would be, if not an improvement, at least a stabilization, because normally, especially because new administrations come in on the, the banner of anti-corruption, at the very least, even if people are not, they don't change for the better,
it should stay
they stay at their place. So that is where my worry is that despite the rhetoric, and so far everybody has been talking about rhetoric of the president. And I found it interesting when I heard even the new special prosecutor referring to his motivation for accepting the appointment, that the rhetoric, he used the word rhetoric of the president. It means that we have not yet gone beyond the talk. And
so what I understand from all that you've said so far is that usually every new government tends to have the benefit of recording a higher, if you like.
That is what the figures show. And if you listen to our president, the figures, you don't argue too much with them. You can argue, but not too much. The figures show that every time there is a new administration, especially when there is a change from one party to another, people tend to shake up a bit and say, well, these people are coming to fight corruption, so we have to be careful.
So then
and so normally
the
records show that people would the perception would either be the same or improve. And that is why this time, for it to have changed by 3 digits,
there's a problem.
I think there is a problem.
There's a problem. We'll talk about what you think is the problem really, and why are we still where we are, despite all of what we have done so far. But let me find out from Ona, what government is saying at the moment is that we're recording this because of the very bad heritage, a very bad perception, if you like, or very bad record that your government, to which you were the advisor when it came to corruption, left behind for them. That is why we're recording this terribly negative result.
That is a very disingenuous, dishonest, and if you like, unacademic assessment. I mean, the surveys that were used to conduct this assessment, there were 9 of them. Only 2 of them came from 2016. Mind you, to qualify into the CPI assessment, you need a minimum of 3 data sources. And out of the 9 data sources, 7 were from 2017. That means that the respondents, and mind you, the CPI is gauging the perception and experiences. People sometimes think perception is imagination. No. In the case of the CPI, one is say the perception is actually the experiences of people who do business, especially international business people who do business not only with our country, but with a number of other countries, and are therefore able to make comparisons. So for me, for anybody, and I hate this business about the blame game, it is from the past. No. If 7 of the surveys tell from 2017 say they scored around 35, and some of them are from the World Bank, from the World Economic Forum, and of course, as I said, mainly business people who do business in Ghana, then you should begin to look at yourself. And I think that is where this government is probably not taking sufficient responsibility.
Okay,
let me give you one example of one possible reason.
So quick one. Let me just announce that Michael Boydie with the Ghana Integrity Initiative was supposed to join us. We think that he's running a bit late, but then we're going to, if he does join us, we'll be able to interrogate this matter from the methodology perspective as well, because they did the work and they are, of course, with the Transparency International. And we'll also try and reach the Herbert Krapper, who spoke for governments this morning, putting the blame on the NDC administration. But talking about the problem, you say that for a new government, based on what we have seen so far, for a new government to record the results we're seeing now in corruption index, there is a problem.
Yes.
What do you think is the problem?
And I was trying to explain that part of the problem is, for instance, when business people, international business people are asked about doing business in a country, sometimes they ask, do you have to pay bribe in order to get your registration and all those things? And I am saying that over the past 1 year, which most of the surveys are taken from 2017, if you look at the way this new administration has populated the public sector, What one can imagine is that they have even increased the bureaucracy that business people normally even complain about. You go to a number of public sector institutions, and apart from the people public servants who are normally in the positions, they have appointed additional political people as assistant directors, assistant this, here and there. And so if you talk about red tapeism, for instance, if you talk about bureaucracy...
Is there an evidence to this?
The evidence...
That they overpopulated the public sector?
Well, if you take even start with the appointees.
Well,
this government
the appointees, yes, but that's not what...
Well, the appointees are going to add to the public sector.
No, have they done that?
No.
Because you're talking about people. You're talking about employing.
No, it is not an imagination. If you have 80 ministers, you have added 80 more people to the public wage. If you have 110, you have added 110 more. So you don't need any research to find that. And so if you take that the fact that this government has appointed the largest number of appointees in terms of ministers and deputy ministers. And in addition to that, from what we know, in the number of, you go to NCA, you go to SNIT, you go to a number of other public institutions, they have created additional positions. So where they have a director at some place and supposed to have a deputy director, they may have two. So you are increasing the bureaucracy. Now, when you increase the bureaucracy, you pave the way for increase in red tapeism. That means that... Is
that the normal practice? The normal practice where
it's a logical thing.
You've been in government. You were advising government on corruption. Is this something that you did whilst you were in government?
Well, I mean, it would be something I would advise against. And mind you, when I say advise against, I would say we should not employ more. We need an efficient public sector, not a populated public sector, because there is a risk, and it's only a risk.
You're describing now.
I'm doing an analysis.
But you are describing now a hypothetical issue. But you have been there.
No, it's not hypothetical.
Well, you're saying that I would have. That's what you said.
If I were giving advice,
yes,
you were citing.
I'm asking what happened.
No, but the reality is that this government has appointed the biggest number of political appointees so far in the country's history. And that is a fact. It is not an imagination. And I am saying that has gone to increase the bureaucracy, not only the ministers and deputy ministers. In fact, as we sit, up till now, Parliament has been requesting for the number of people working at the office of the president. Since last year, it has not been given. This is a mandatory thing. And one of the things that does is that it gives us an impression about what is going on at the executive arm of government. And for an overloaded executive such as we have now, the chances are that the red tape is going to be longer.
Okay.
It's as simple as that. Then, of course, chances. I mean, we have to be careful. This is a scientific thing. I don't want to make statements of fact.
That's why I keep asking whether there's evidence to some of the suggestions you're making, because you can't just make a suggestion. For example, you're saying chances are that they would have employed more.
Well, but in science, you talk about probabilities, and the probabilities have to be based on some factors.
I'll come back to you. Just hold on for me. Let's hear from Parliament what they're saying. The minority, for example, are saying that they've been vindicated by this latest corruption perception index. The minority spokesperson on communication, ABA Fuseni, says the index shows that the NPP government has failed in the fight against corruption, as the NDC repeatedly claimed.
Number of specific corruption cases, starting from the bond issued by the finance minister, which was vitiated by fraud. And the minority did not point out. We gave evidence at press conference upon press conference and formally sent a petition to government. The government was not even interested in looking at it. When the finance minister even came before the floor of the House, he could not even present the House with a copy of the bond. Today, as we speak, the 5% of the 95 was given to Franklin Templeton. The 5%, nobody knows. It's shrouded in secrecy because of the opaque nature of that transaction. We had the occasion to talk about 5 million contaminated liters of fuel, which was sent out under corrupt and opaque circumstances. We've had premix We've had issues coming from Kolebu. We've had issues at the presidency itself, which even one of the key supporters of the MPP in the run-up to the 2016 election, A+. He's not an NDC man. He said it. So the corruption in this government has been so stinking that even MPP members, including my honorable chairman on the Committee on Communication, Honorable Kennedy Ajapong. He's not Kennedy Ajapong. Is he an NDC man? If there's anybody who even hates NDC with a passion, it's him. But he says that corruption in his government is so stinking, he's ashamed.
You know, but
just under 1 year. So look, this perception, this corruption perception that has been published, it's a vindication of the position of the minority that there's massive corruption in this government.
This is probably a spillover from 2016 going into 2017, and the perception.
It cannot be 2016. It has nothing to do with 20. Indeed, 2016, the corruption perception in the index of the under the NDC was 48. If you look at go back and see, from the highest point of anti-corruption has been under the NDC government in 2012. Go back and do. It was under our regime that we registered the highest, 48%. Never in the annals of our country have we received more than that.
ABF Husseini there, obviously he disagrees, but then government also disagrees with him. Here is Deputy Environment Minister Patricia Appiah-Jay, who is saying that the NPP government actually has performed better.
In terms of how well the NPP has done in fighting corruption compared to the NDC, some things has gotten worse over the last 1 year. Do you agree with such a perception?
I'm not saying that. I cannot agree to the fact that the assessment is for 2017. The assessment is actually for 2016. Because if you take the assessment period, we cannot immediately have an assessment of a situation a year prior to the outcome. It's obviously against 2016. And we have actually taken the necessary steps to ensure that we are coming up with a way of dealing with it, and not just shelving or putting it under, sweeping it under the carpet.
Sometimes the reference is made to the boss scandal, the bond that was issued, and the minority makes huge capital out of it and make the point they think these are corrupt.
I don't see what you're talking about bond issue.
Patricia Appiah-Jay there. I've also been joined in the studio now by Michael Brady. He's with the Ghana Integrity Initiative. They are part of the group that conducted the survey. You're welcome, Michael.
Thank you.
So I was just having the conversation with Mr. Batidam here, who advised the government, the previous administration, on corruption. And I'm sure that you know this. But this issue that keeps coming up about 2 surveys that were done in 2016 and 7 of the surveys that were conducted in 2017. Is there a specific reason why?
Well, it is because that is the data source that we have. And what the survey usually spans 24 months, and therefore it is not a problem. It doesn't necessarily take away the reality or the outcome. It doesn't take anything away from the outcome. And it also doesn't add necessarily or skew it in. I think what is worrying and why we are concerned about this debate is that the survey is not for an evaluation of the NPP government. Neither is it an evaluation or vindication of the NDC government.
And of course, this is a scientific
so it says
work.
Ghana.
Right, so it is the scientific work, but you also know the socio-cultural or the socio-political issues that some of these research or some of these works do for society. You know that definitely this is going to be discussed along political lines, like it or not.
Yeah, but that's unfortunate because it then takes away the lessons that we have to learn.
Right.
It takes completely away the critical lessons that we have to learn. You see, the survey might not necessarily report that somebody is engaging in corruption, but it could so be that you are not even acting. You're not taking the necessary actions that is required of you to act. And that is why it is influencing the perception that corruption is on the rise. I'll give you an example. Ghana, for instance, in 2016, pledged to the international community to do a number of things, the UK Anti-Corruption Summit. And so when the government returned, he passed the beneficiary ownership clauses in the new amended Companies Act. But after that, it seems nothing has happened.
So to sleep.
Exactly, we went to sleep. So all these pledges are there. The international, we as the ordinary people may not really pay attention, but the international community pays attention to them, and it informs their decision to relate to the country one way or the other. Okay. Let's go, the other thing is also the issue about the right to information. Everybody is talking about the right to information bill. I mean, this is one opportunity that would have helped Ghanaians to also engage in the fight against corruption because they have access to information. That has not been done. The Witness Protection Law will have enforced the Whistleblowers Act so that it will give citizens who will have volunteered information for the fight against corruption some comfort that if I do that, I would not be victimized. That has not been passed. So there are inactions that will also influence the outcome of the election. Not to talk about the fact that, yes, indeed, there are corruption allegations that have not been convincingly resolved. So there's the there's a bust scandal, the back and forth of the
A+, there's the energy ministry issue, there's the finance ministry, trade ministry, and it goes on and on.
But also, we reckon that there are also pluses, things that initiatives that government has started taking. But you cannot, this initiative does not immediately translate into the results. So with time, we will see the outcome or result. And I'm just praying that we move away from the politicization, because it's a countrywide thing.
That's the difficulty, because now is the politicians are in charge, and you have to go and ask and demand answers why we're failing in our fight against corruption. And anytime you go to them to demand the answers, they tell you that it's the other political party, and that's what has become the political football that we're all playing. Mr. Batidam, let me bring you in on this, and I want us to quickly move from this part of the conversation to what we're doing now and what we should do if we should see any improvement in the corruption index records that we're having so far.
Well, let me begin by agreeing with my younger brother and colleague. Because you see, when all the time that we have been launching these reports, we have been saying, what lessons can we learn from them? What are the things we are doing right that we should do more? And what are the things we are not doing enough on? And I think one of the lessons I was pointing out is that it appears that even if you take, and I agree with you, we can't run away from the politics. Certainly. Even if you take the same period of an NDC or an MPP government, you see them going up, improving, and going back again. You take the 8 years of Kufuor, and you see that it improved during this period and went down. Do you take the 8 years of NDC following, they go up and come down. It means that we are not putting in place measures that would make the fight sustainable. And those are some of them he has mentioned. Right, to strengthening the demand for accountability. And I think we have been getting that wrong. The corruption equation is that monopoly plus discretion minus accountability. The accountability deficiency is the demand for corruption, and that is weak. People are sitting down and saying government is not fighting corruption. Well, governments don't fight corruption, people do. If governments were to have their way, they may not even put in place any serious measure, because it is about checking themselves. Now that is why I think a far-reaching national strategy like the National Anti-Corruption Action Plan, which has spelled out roles for so many stakeholders, government, and by government I mean not just the executive but also the legislature, the judiciary, the media and civil society, and so many, the private sector, all the stakeholders. We all have roles to play. But and if we don't play those roles...
Speaking of the roles, Mr. Batidam, those are the roles you've mentioned. We need to get a bit more specific.
So one of the things I think, one of the serious criticisms I have about the current administration is the fact that they suspended, and I put suspended in quotes, they suspended the implementation of the NACAP in 2017 because I've not seen a report indicating, and 2017 was year 3. of the implementation of the 10-year National Anti-Corruption Action Plan. And I'm saying in that year, virtually nothing was happening. And what the government kept saying is that we are waiting to put in place a special prosecutor. For goodness sake, we now have the special prosecutor.
What were the initial steps you took? The NACAP was launched under your administration.
It was launched in 2015. And if you go and look, every year there is a monitoring committee under the auspices.
Are you able to tell us what key steps were taken?
It is not about me and the NDC administration, because I'm not even talking about that. That report is presented normally by SHRIGE, which is the institution leading it. So annually, there is supposed to be a progress report on how we are implementing the NACAP. This happened in 2015, it happened in 2016, but as far as I know, I've not heard of any report in 2017 on progress on the implementation of the NACAP. And the implementation of the NACAP is far-reaching. It goes beyond just prosecution. Mind you, one of the problems we have about focusing our anti-corruption drive on prosecution alone is that, first of all, it's very expensive. It's not easy to get successful convictions. Sometimes they can take long periods.
Because of lack of evidence.
Yes, so we cannot just wait for one leg of the corruption fight to do the trick. We must engage all the stakeholders, and that is why I think that we lost an opportunity in 2017 when more or less the new administration suspended the implementation of NACAP by not continuing to engage in public education, continuing to put in place some of the reforms. The things he has mentioned, we have had a review by the UNCAC, the United Nations Convention, in 2013. Certain recommendations were made.
Okay.
We have had the Constitutional Review Implementation Committee. They have made some recommendations, some of them in the area of asset declaration.
Mr. Basidam, I'll come back to you for your very final comments. But Michael Brady, let me find out from you, going forward with this corruption index and the negative record Ghana has made, how do we move on? And going forward, how do we ensure that the source of results that come out from some of these indexes don't push us all into the political football and we play around it and then we leave the issues there, and the next time the corruption index just keeps disgracing us as a country?
Right, thank you very much. I think just a bit of information, Mr. Martin, we used to run JI, so he knows, he's my boss. But just a bit of information, 2017, the government gave SHRIGE the highest budgetary allocation, 1.2 million Ghana cedis to implement the NACAP. The report is not out yet, but that just for information.
Is that something that GII, for example, has followed?
Yes, yes. No, GII made a lot of, we congratulated government, for instance, for that move because it's the biggest budgetary allocation for the implementation of NACAP. So it was a good
hopefully
initiative.
we'll record some progress.
So we should record some progress, hopefully. But, well, if we don't, we should hold SHRIGE accountable.
Okay.
But just a point of correction.
Just so we don't keep going back and forth.
There was an announcement that a certain amount would be given to
so the point you want to make is that we're not sure if that amount has gone
with the SHRIGE,
and the money has gone through.
According to them, it is just left with the last quarter.
Very well. We need to wrap up this conversation. So,
but there are a number of things that, and Mr. Batnan had spoken to the issue of the fact that we don't have to over-rely on prosecution. But unfortunately, well, he spearheaded the NACAP review. You disagree with him? I don't disagree with him. That is not the issue. But it is also our weakest link in the fight against corruption. Prosecution, investigation, and sanctioning seems to be one of our weakest links when it comes to the fight against corruption. And that is why we think the OSP, the Office of the Special Prosecutor, became even necessary in the first place, because it doesn't seem that we're always getting it right. But then also the issue of asset recovery is there. We seem to be doing that. There is also the issue of prevention, and that is where the laws that will make corruption a high risk and then low gain venture comes in, and then we need to do a lot more public education. But going forward, like I said, God's government has started doing some of the initiatives. It's worth mentioning it so that we don't play the political football with it again. I mean, we talk about the digitalization of operations so that it reduces interface between human, the service providers, and then, this thing. And so the issue of the paperless port, if done well, if done well, should improve some of the things, yes, going forward, even reduce corruption in our society. And also, we are talking about the laws, the number of laws that we have listed, the right to information. If they are passed, it will also help. And then also, if the special prosecutor indeed implements the laws and ensure that human rights are also not violated. There are two things, and we really need to wrap up, unfortunately. So, yes, when it is, and then if investigations are done legally and prosecutions are done and assets are recovered, we believe that we'll be singing a different story come 20.
It will be interesting to continue the conversation some other time. We're looking a bit more into the methodology. That's an area that people have raised a few questions about as well. Mr. Batidam, let me take your very final words.
Well, as I said, this country, we all want to see the country moving forward. And my analysis had to do with the fact that usually a window of opportunity opens with new administrations to get some reforms in place. And it appears to me that we are missing that window, because usually it's within the first 18 to 24 months. And we have passed 12 months. I'm hoping that with the new measure being put in place through the establishment of the Special Prosecutor's Office, which again is only at the moment increasing the expenditure line without a guarantee that we will get value.
That will be a very interesting conversation for another day.
I am hoping that the fact that the fear of God has been apparently put in people by the appointment of a special prosecutor, it will make us begin to step on the brakes on the wrong things and perhaps begin to increase the moral and ethical issues that will help us to build a better governance architecture that will propel us on the development trajectory. Forward.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming. Daniel Batidam is an advisor on corruption, was an advisor on corruption to the former administration led by John Mahama, and Michael Bwedi is with the Ghana Integrity Initiative.
And I am still representing Ghana as a member of the African Union Advisory Board on Corruption.
On corruption.
You people prefer what I was to what I am.
That's because we tried to put the conversation. No, that's because we put the conversation in context. Yes.
Because you want to make it political.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much, gentlemen. You're still watching The Pulse with me, Gifty Ando.